The 2024 Wired Freedom here next to me is what happens when I think a brand takes a no-holds-bar approach to micromobility. So how does this 60-volt, 1,500-watt nominal full suspension e-bike stack up against the competition? Well, let's get into that, but first, let's take a closer look. Now, if you thought those specs I listed before were awesome, wait till you hear the price of the Wired Freedom. And if you do decide after hearing the specs and the price and kind of seeing the overall component layout of this bike that you want to purchase your own, we do ask everyone to simply click the link down in the description. That is a free and easy way to help support us here at E-Bike Escape. Really helps us out and helps us continue to make content like this one. And before we talk any more about this bike, I do want to kind of address that this bike only happened because you guys out there have requested it so many times in the comments. Every time we review a fat tire e-bike or talk about any sort of fast e-bike or moped style e-bike, everybody asks about the Wired Freedom here. So thank you guys very much for bringing this to our attention. And here is that review. Now, no more beating around the bush. This bike is high spec and comes in at only $19.99. That is a very impressive price for the specs, the 60 volts, the 1,500-watt motor, and a 20 amp hour battery, and full suspension. I almost forgot. Now, one of the ways I think Wired is able to offer such a great component list and price e-bike is by really kind of focusing on just simply two models and sticking to that. Now, they have the Wired Freedom here, as well as the Cruiser, which is going to be a step-through variant of this bike. I'll talk about that a little bit more when I talk about the sizing of this e-bike. And before I get any further, I just want to kind of hit on a little bit more that this is an e-bike, but in my mind, this is only an e-bike when it is operated within that class 1, 2, and 3 system. This bike, unlike some out there, does have the ability to be completely uncapped and give you access to throttle up to 35 miles an hour, which puts it outside of the specs or realm of the federal classification of an e-bike. So us here at E-Bike Escape, as well as the folks over at Wired, want to make sure that everybody out there understands to operate this bike in a safe, controlled manner. Make sure your environment allows you to operate your bike to whatever speed you feel fit, as well as we want to make sure that you consult all your local laws and regulations so that you're not going to maybe accidentally get yourself in trouble for operating something that's not technically considered a bike. And one thing that I want to stress to everybody out there, it only takes one bad e-biker to make all e-bikers look bad. So just please make sure that you're operating your bike in a safe, controlled manner, especially if you're on bike paths. We don't want to lose access to some of the wonderful trails that you have, some rails, trails, things like that. So a little bit of word of caution. However, that really shouldn't outshine the fact that this is a fantastically spec'd e-bike, and the components that make up this bike are very nicely chosen and really make this probably one of my top choices now for an e-bike. I do have to also admit, before receiving this bike in for review, I was a little hesitant, like, oh, this bike's it's gonna skimp in some category. It's gonna have off-brand brakes, or it's gonna skimp on any of the components. But I have to admit when I'm wrong, and I was wrong in that case. This bike has name brand brakes, name brand drivetrain, really nice display. The motor is from a brand and company that I recognize. It's also UL certified, which is not something every e-bike brand out there can say. So overall, very nice e-bike, but that's enough babbling. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the specifics about this bike. Now, some specifics about the Wired Freedom here. I know I already talked about price, $19.99, but it does also come offered in 5 different colors. You get this blue like you see here. There's also a green option, a black option, an orange option, and a white option. And then this bike has a 300-pound capacity with a 50-pound rear payload capacity on the rear rack. It also tips the scales at just 88 pounds. Now that is complete with battery. If you take the battery out, it's a 12-pound battery, so it does weigh 76 pounds without the battery. And now we should talk about the sizing. So this is a big bike. I don't want that to not come across well on camera. The height range that Wired recommends this bike for is gonna be 5'4" up to 6'4". However, this does have an 18-inch seat tube length, which if you translate seat tube length, typically associates to size. And so if you look at other big box brands, when you have an 18, it says an 18.3 inch, but when you have an 18-inch seat tube length, it actually translates to a medium, which has about a size range of 5'7" and up. So this bike does have a big feeling to it. So if you are on the shorter range, you may want to look at the Cruiser like I was hinting at. Comes at the same price, has the same 5 color options, but does lack the full suspension. So it no longer has a rear suspension, still maintains the nice RST front suspension and all of the other same 60-volt components, big motor, things like that. So now I know I said that this was a big bike, but here is why I say that. Here's me getting on the bike. This is with the seat tube in its lowest placement, so I really can't get the seat any lower. No, I can sit on the bike, but I am kind of on my tippy toes here to kind of hold the bike up. Again, I am a 5'7" rider with a 29-inch inseam. I have no problem getting full leg extension, but just kind of when I'm maybe stopped at a light, I am touching that down tube. Maybe it gets a bit uncomfortable, so that step-through model may be a nice option there for somebody out there. And again, one of the things that adds to the height feeling of this bike is gonna be that rear suspension, because you need extra room in there for that shock to move up and down. Now let's go ahead and bring you in close and show you some of the components up close that make up the Wired Freedom. I know I talked about how big this bike was, and that's why I was very happy to see name brand Tekro hydraulic disc brakes on this bike, as well as matching Tekro 180mm front rotors. The front wheel is also held on with a quick release, so if you wanted to transport your bike around, you could. Wrapped around the outside of the wheel here, we have these nice black rims, but we also have 26x4" Kenda Crusade tires, name brand tires we see on a lot of bikes, keeping you a little bit protected from splashing. You get this somewhat half coverage metal front fender, and then in the rear you also have a full coverage metal rear fender with wired branding on the back. And then you got a little bit of a glimpse of the suspension in the rear, but we also get suspension in the front, and they didn't skimp there. We have an RST guide 75mm front suspension fork, complete with a lockout knob over here on the right and a preload adjustment knob on the left-hand side. Now the front fork on this bike is going to be a coil front fork, whereas the rear shock on this bike is going to be a DNM air rear shock, complete with rebound and lockout knob. And then on the side of the shock here, you also have this really nice red cover, which is going to be for the air actually inside of the rear shock. Now the shock can be adjusted to fit you, the end rider. There is a max amount of air pressure on the side, as well as Wired includes the actual manual for this shock. So you can kind of look up the chart. Well, I'll go ahead and put it on the screen now, so you really know how to dial that in. And a quick other word of caution: before you can adjust the air pressure in this, you cannot use a typical bike pump, even though that looks like a normal air valve. You need a suspension shock pump. Just a little bit of an extra cost that you will have to do, or you can maybe take it into a local bike shop. They should be able to just quickly throw in the pressure to do that for you. But here is what it looks like when I'm pushing on the bike. Yeah, you can really feel that nice suspension front and rear. So we work our way up, we're greeted to this really nice and bright LED front headlight. I'll put some nighttime pictures on the screen for you now. And if you can see here too, we also, right above this, get this really nice neoprene wired wrapping. Now, before we talk about the actual components that make up the cockpit, I have to call out these handlebars. These are a low-rise BMX style handlebar, but one great thing about these style of handlebar is that they really allow you to adjust the cockpit. So if you maybe needed a little bit of extra room, you could adjust the bolts here and simply tilt them away from you. Or if you were a little bit shorter rider and you were okay with being on your tippy toes on this bike, you could actually tilt them back. You can really just tune and adjust the cockpit to make it as comfortable for you. But they also bring your arms and everything up a little bit, kind of put you in more of a relaxed position. I'll be sure to talk about these handlebars and how I fit on them a little bit more in the riding footage towards the end of this review. Now, I really like the layout of this cockpit. It has a lot of name brand and recognized components. Starting out, we have a locking ergonomic grip on the side. Then we also have this Tekro hydraulic disc brake lever, complete with motor cutoff. Then we have these really nice 3 rubber buttons that operate the display, which we'll get to here in a minute. We also have a included bell. We have the standard 7-speed cis index gear shift, a twist grip throttle, matching grip and matching lever as the other side. Now we're currently in direct sunlight, so you can kind of get an idea of how easy this display is to see. We'll go ahead and push this into the shade, so we'll talk about the display overall. But this is going to be one of the drawbacks of a LCD color display. A little bit hard to see in direct sunlight, but you can still make out the numbers. All right, here we are in the shade. Hopefully you'll be able to see the display a little bit easier. Again, it's a bright LCD color display. Go ahead and turn it off so you can get kind of the full experience here. You get greeted to the Wired e-bikes logo there. And then starting out upper left-hand corner, you get a really nice battery bar and the actual voltage located in the battery. Upper right-hand side, you get the current ambient temperature. Front and center, you get your miles per hour. Bottom left, you get the current pedal assist level, 0 all the way to 5. You get motor power, and that's going to be the wattage of the motor that it's currently putting out. Nice if you want to be able to pay attention to that. we have the current time and the current distance that you have traveled. Now, if you push the power button over here, you notice that this changes. We have our average speed. And then down here in the bottom right, that changes to the total time that the bike has been on, as well as an odometer. And then you also have the option for it to change to your max speed. And then one thing that is hidden over here on the back of the display, this little rubber plug here that you're gonna pull down, you have a USB port there, so you'll be able to charge maybe your cell phone or something like that, which you will have room on these handlebars to mount. There is also no bosses or mounting ability on the front of the down tube here for a front basket. And here is a look at that large battery pack and wired branding. We'll go ahead and pull that out in just a minute. But I did want to talk again, or I did want to give you a little bit of a close-up on this rear shock, as well as call out something that I have seen other brands skimp on, but Wired did not, and that's gonna be actually these rear mounting points for the suspension, how it oscillates and moves. And that's actually gonna be that these are actual bearings in here. We've seen some bikes that are just super cheap and kind of have plastic or maybe a brass insert there, but on all of these points up here, as well as kind of tucked in down here, this is a bearing. So it is nice to see bearings there. Now you may have to replace those bearings over time as they do wear out. It's gonna depend on the terrain you're riding on, but overall bearings are gonna last a lot longer than, of course, something that's made of plastic. Let me go ahead and pull that battery out for you guys. You're gonna need the keys here to pull the battery out. Keys are only needed for removing the battery, and they go in on the driver's side there. You're gonna twist the keys towards the back of the bike, and the battery is actually gonna push out towards that driver's side as well. It's gonna simply tilt up and out, and then you lift it up and towards the front of the bike to remove it. Now, we didn't actually have to remove it to see these specs here on the side. 60 volt, 20 amp hours, 1200 watt hours. That is gonna be thanks to it being 60 volts. And it does also say Samsung cells down here on the bottom, as there are Samsung cells located in here in the battery. On the top here, we have a 4 LED display, so you can tell the charge in the battery itself, as well as the battery can be charged both on or off the bike. Right here, there's a nice rubber plug. You simply peel that back and you get the access to the charge port, as well as a USB charging port. If you want to, again, charge maybe your phone directly off of the battery, you could do that, or maybe carry it around as a battery bank. Now, I did make this claim at the start of this review, and I want to make sure to recite that this bike is UL certified. There's going to be UL 2849, which means it's going to be on the entire electronic system, not just the UL 2271 for the battery. Now, with such a large battery, which we're going to go ahead and put back in the bike, you simply line it up on the side, line up the bottom, angle it back in, and click the battery in. It's a little bit tricky the first time or two you do that, so just be aware of that. But one thing about this battery being so large that you are gonna get a very long range. Now, Wired's claim for range on this bike is 80 miles, and that's gonna be 80 miles if you were in pedal assist level 1 on the stock settings. You don't adjust anything in the display. But realistically, we think you're gonna get maybe somewhere in the 30 to 40 mile range. And again, that's all gonna be dictated on how fast you're going, as well as how much throttle you're using. If you are gonna be traveling with this bike, we do wanna recommend a product for you guys, shameless plug for shop.ebikeescape.com, and that's going to be for this bike case battery bag. It's going to fit this battery very nicely. This is a flame resistant and waterproof bag. Really nice, kind of stops your battery from getting banged around. If maybe you're transporting your bike on a bike rack or something like that, kind of drops those 12 pounds. Transported in this battery bag. Again, a nice high quality product from Bike Case on our shop.ebikeescape.com store. And one other nice thing that shows that Wired is really thinking about all aspects of this bike, that's going to be that the charger that is included with the Wired Freedom here is going to be a 3 amp charger. So a little bit larger than we typically see, which is going to be nice considering that this battery is so big. Means you'll be able to charge this battery up from completely empty in about 6 to 7 hours. Now, as we move down the frame here towards the other big component of this bike, the motor, we're greeted to this very large plastic case here located on the back of the seat tube. This is going to be your controller housing. Now, normally don't really talk about controllers, but on this bike, I feel like it probably needs to be said. This is a very large controller. This is a 40 amp controller, which again should be capable of speeds well into 30 miles an hour. Be sure to stay tuned for that. Located just below that, we almost have an equally as big front gear ring. This is going to be a really kind of nice aluminum single metal sided chainring, but it's going to be a 56 tooth front chainring, which means that they are thinking about those higher speeds you're going to be traveling at and really giving the ability to pedal up there. And then as we follow this chain back, here we are greeted to the 11 to 28 tooth 7-speed rear freewheel. And then shifting the gears over that, we have a Shimano tourney rear derailleur. And then just on the inside of that, of course, we have this massive motor. Now, I don't know if you'll be able to see the sticker there. This is a 60-volt motor. It's also from Handtech, which I have seen that brand before, but this is a 1500 watt nominal, 2200 watt peak rear motor. Now I am super excited to show you guys what that motor is capable of. Let's go ahead and wrap up some of the other components. Now located on the back of this really nice 50-pound weight limited rear rack, we have this really nice brake light. Let me go ahead and pull off that protective covering there. Now this is a daytime running light and brake light. So you hold the up button and the headlight will turn on, and then as you pull the brakes, it will actually get brighter. So that is a actual working rear brake light. And then moving up over the rack, the last component I feel we have to talk about is going to be this seat. Now this is a wired branded seat. We have the brand looking on the back. This is a very plush seat. It's actually a little bit wider than what we typically see, and it has a nice overall soft feel to it, but seats are kind of one of those things that is really just up to the butt of the rider. Now that pretty much wraps up the components, so let's get out and show you what the 60-volt motor is capable of. All right, here we are, riding portion for this e-bike. The part I think most people are going to be very interested in: how is the wired freedom to ride? How does it handle flat ground, hills, everything like that? So let's go ahead and let's go through this. So starting out here, I'm just going to give myself a little bit of throttle to get off the line. And first thing that becomes very apparent when you sit up on this bike, again, is it does feel a little bit larger, but the cockpit with the handlebars being upright, and then how cushy the seat is, it's actually a very comfortable e-bike to ride. I really don't have any complaints about the fit of it, the feel of it, the suspension, very cushy. I've got a couple miles on this now, and it's so far no complaints. Very, like I said, very soft ride. A little bit of hill here, so I want to take this moment to try out the brakes for you, as that's something I think is going to be very important on this bike. Doing about 28 miles an hour. Let's lock up those brakes. There we go. No problem from those Tekro hydraulic disc brakes there. Slows us down very nicely. Here we are. Let's go ahead and let's using throttle, get up to speed again. Let's get up to about 25 miles an hour, and I'll do that one more time. Here we are, flat ground and brakes. A little bit of steam coming off the front ones I see there. It is very capable. The brakes, good choice from wired. So now we're on a little bit of a flat ground section. Let's go ahead and run through the pedal assist level. Starting in gear 1, in pedal assist level 1, just kind of pedaling here, and I'm kind of feeling myself immediately getting no tension from my legs here, and the motor gets me up to about 10, 11 miles an hour. So let's go ahead and slow it down here, do about 5 miles an hour. And again, gear 1 on the shifter, and 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, almost immediately. And I start kind of ghost pedaling. I would shift up, pedal to level 2. And I'm getting about 170 watts out of the motor, about 13, 14, 15 miles an hour here, 14 or 15. So it looks like the gearing, pedal assist levels rather, are not going to be limited via speed. They're just going to be a power cap, which is very nice. And then of course, has to be said, the throttle is uncapped or untied to any of those. Let's go ahead and kick it up, pedal to level 2. And now the wattage is going to ramp in very nicely. And we're getting about 280 watts, 290 watts. Yeah, 279 to 290, somewhere in that range is the wattage here. I'm actually getting a little bit of pressure on my legs now because there was a little bit of a hill there. So now it's going to flatten out again. And still, yeah, 290 watts, about 12 to 14 miles an hour there. So still staying in about third. Now, you do only have 7 gears on this bike. However, remember that 56 tooth front chainring is going to mean that pedaling at lower speeds is going to be a little harder, but once you get up into the higher speeds, that's where that gearing is really going to shine. Pedals level 3, again, it nicely ramps in the power, 400, 500 watts there. I'm starting to ghost pedal a little bit, 16, 15 miles an hour here, 17, I'd probably shift up to about 4th here. And yeah, it still looks like third, pedals level 3 is 535 watts or so. So still, yeah, 535, and we're doing about 18 miles an hour is where this gearing feels pretty nice. I could almost maybe shift up even into 5th over here on the shifter, which is going to be, again, 18, 19, 20 miles an hour. So it's going to be as much power as you want to put in with your legs. It's going to amplify it out, man. Let me tell you, this very powerful bike. Go pedal assist level 4 now. And 699, 700, 720 watts. So yeah, we're doing about 700, It's like 715 to 730, somewhere in that neighborhood of wattage from the motor. 21 miles an hour in 5th gear here. So I am going into a bit of a headwind here. Slow down here and turn around. That way I'm not going into a headwind. Just see how this bike feels. All right, here we go. So I'm not gonna shift down, and this bike is just gonna gradually feed me in the power and then taper it back off. So I mean, I'm still getting 760 watts now, 18, 19, yeah. Kind of starting to get to that ghost pedaling part. I'd probably shift up 23, 24 miles an hour, 750 watts. And now I would shift all the way up into 7th, and yeah, 25 miles an hour. And I'm feeling pressure on my legs. So again, this gearing is perfectly geared for higher speeds. That is what this bike is clearly intended to. So this is about the spot I've kicked it up pedal to level 5. And now, yeah, wattage is immediately jumping from about that 750 all the way up to that 1500 watts or so. Let me go ahead and kick this around. We're gonna go back into the headwind because this bike's not even gonna bat an eye at that headwind here. So yeah, instantly 1514, 87, 1488, and still gear 7 on the shifter here. Yeah, 1400 watts into a headwind. And this bike, I'm still putting in pressure with my legs. Super nice, 26, 27 miles an hour, 28. And you can hear me a little bit on the mic here. Not really breaking a sweat or not really losing my breath at all. So 29 miles an hour. Now I should also note that I did overclock this bike before running through these gears. That's because I thought most people would want to see what it's capable of, but the only setting I changed was the top speed. So 28, 29 miles an hour here. That's just with the top speed overridden. If you want to be able to get into some of those more off-road only speeds, you're gonna have to change a couple other settings, which we'll talk about in the segment just after this, where I'll run through and show you how to get to those high speeds. Or this is gonna be throttle only here, and we're doing 26. I mean, it's gonna keep carrying me. 27. And even at 28 miles an hour, the top speed overridden, it does not cap the throttle here. Because we're getting 29 miles per hour according to the display, or 30 miles an hour now according to the display, and still getting 1300 watts. So it's just gonna hold me right there. So one thing I did want to call out before we throw it to the hill climb footage, which, spoiler, it is going to crush, is I want to show you how the cruise control works. And the way that works is you hold the throttle at a nice steady speed, and you hold down on the button, and right there where it says assist level, like I was saying before, where it showed throttle or assist, it's gonna show the word cruise. You're also gonna get a nice cruise control symbol there at the top. And here we are going up the hill. It's gonna hold us about that 1400 watts, which is gonna be translate to whatever speed. And then as soon as we get to the top, I assume it's going to accelerate back up to, whatever 1400 watts will carry you at according to the terrain. But just a nice feature. If you're going on a nice long cruise, you can kind of just set it at whatever wattage you want from the motor, and it'll just kind of hold you there. And to deactivate that cruise control, once you're ready for that, you simply twist the throttle and let go. So if you try and accelerate past it, or if you tap your brake levers, those are nice quick ways. It does not deactivate if you start pedaling. Just kind of keep a word of caution there. A little bit of an extra section here for the Wired Freedom. We had to talk about overriding this bike. It wasn't something that I was capable of figuring out on my own. I actually had to reach out to customer service, and customer service was quickly able to get back to me and just kind of walk me through what settings I needed to adjust. They did express to me, and we want to express to you as well, that this is something that should only be done on closed courses, and this is something that you are doing on your own. So you need to make sure that you are operating this bike in a safe, controlled manner and in the proper environment. I know that sounds like a broken record, but again, I want to stress, it only takes one e-bike owner to destroy trail access for all e-bike owners. So very quickly, let's go ahead and run through how we adjust the top speed to get access to that full 2200 watts. And I got a little bit of a hill climb here, so I'm gonna show you what this bike is capable of crushing a hill test uncapped. In order to get into the advanced settings, hold your power button, turn your bike on. Within the first 5 seconds of the bike being on, hold the up and down buttons. It's gonna be technically 2 settings, but I'm gonna show you 3 settings that you might want to adjust. First one is gonna be this LIM setting at the top. That's gonna be your top speed or your speed limit. And so I just have that turned all the way up to 72 kilometers an hour. And the next one you're gonna want to adjust is going to be your C5 setting. So C5 is going to be how much power you have access to from the motor. Out of the box, it comes limited, so you only get access to about the 1500 watts that we are kind of seeing in pedals level 5. However, if you turn that down to O2, you get a what they call a slow start, and then it ramps into max power being the 2200 watts. A little bit of a glimpse over here on my GPS, 35 miles an hour. Now, you can turn that up to where there is no slow start ramping, and it just gives you full access to the power of 2200 watts. But it's not something I would recommend. It is a bit jolting and can throw you off the bike if you're not prepared for it. So using settings 00, 01, or 02 are going to be great ways to have a slow ramp in of power and then still have access to the full 2200 watts. Or if you need to limit that power because you're lending this bike out to somebody, you can leave it on the stock 03 setting, or even limit the power, limit the ramp in even more by changing the settings. Now, I will have a link down in the description to a full display walkthrough where it gives you a bit more of like in-depth book knowledge on these overriding settings, but quickly I would turn that to 02. That's going to give you full access to power. And then the next setting you may want to adjust over here is going to be C14. Now C14 is going to be your amount of power that is tied to your pedal assist level. So it goes 1, 2, and 3. 1 is going to be the least amount of power that you're going to be given in each pedal assist level, and then you still get full access via throttle or pedal assist level 5. But like we were seeing in my riding footage, you were getting about 190 watts in pedal assist level 1 on setting 2. And if you turn that down to 1, it would maybe limit you to about 100 watts. And if you turn it up to number 3 for C14, you would get somewhere around 300-400 watts. You just get higher speeds in those various pedal assist levels. I'm going to go ahead and leave that on 2 because I don't really need that to show you what this bike is capable of. So very quickly, let me go ahead and hop on the bike, and I'm going to show you how fast this bike can go when it is uncapped on a closed course. Quick disclaimer too, when you're riding and you have this amount of power, you burn through some battery and some voltage. So just be aware that you will want a fully charged battery for this. All right, flipping around. Anybody who has seen my reviews knows that this is a hill I used to test a lot of the e-bikes on for hill climb. And I kind of just wanted to show you how much this bike, how powerful this bike is and how fast it'll crush this hill. So anywhere near as much as what we have seen. So typical speed on this hill from your average e-bike was somewhere between, I don't know, 10, 15 miles an hour, some lower, some just a touch higher. But this bike, 18 miles an hour there was our low speed there coming up that hill. That is impressive. Now it flattens out a bit up here on top. So let's see what this bike is capable of top speed wise. Very quickly getting up 30 miles an hour, 31, 32, 33. And again, I am not pedaling. So about 33, 34 miles an hour. And that was with a full battery at the start, but it is not now. And here we go. Even at 32, 33 miles an hour, I am still able to provide my own power thanks to that really, really high gearing. So here we go, a little bit more of a hill here. I would probably shift down. And still 24, 25 miles an hour. I mean, this bike just zooms. And I don't know if you'll be able to see the wattage down there on the display, but we are currently getting 2,000 watts. And I saw that peak somewhere around just below 2,200 watts. So very, very powerful motor. Here you go, 25. And then as we get back up here on flat ground, we cruise all the way back up to 32, 30, 31, 32 miles an hour. All right, I know there's sun out in Wisconsin, but when you're riding at 32 miles an hour, it gets quite a bit colder. All right, that should hopefully give you just a taste of what this bike is capable of. All right, let's go ahead and throw that to our hill climb test so you can see what this bike is capable of. Up the hill, we test all of our e-bikes on. Hopefully that wasn't too much of a spoiler for you for how well this bike's gonna do. Let's throw it to that. All right, let's go ahead and jump right into the hill climb. First time up the hill, I'm gonna go up while pedaling, so you guys just kind of get an idea of what this bike is capable of during pedaling. And a little bit of something that I figured out, this gearing, since it's meant for high speed, is not great for pedaling up a hill. So right now, since we know the gears, the pedal assist levels are limited, I'm only getting about 160 watts. And yeah, it's a little bit of a slog here at 5-6 miles an hour because that 56 tooth front chainring takes a lot to get moving. So I would almost instantly leave it in gear 1 and kick it up pedal assist level 2. Get about 270 watts here. By about third, here we go. We're getting about 500 watts, pedal assist level 3. The gearing is starting to be able to pedal and make some sense here, and that's about 5-6 miles an hour. But even then, I would still probably kick it up to 4th, take all of that extra pressure off, and that's where we get about 700 watts. And as we know, pedal assist level 5 puts us up to 1,500. So here we are, gear 1, doing about 9-10 miles an hour. This feels pretty good. But even now, kicking up pedal assist level 5, but it went right from 800 watts all the way up to 1,500, and the speed went from 9 all the way up to 12. I would probably shift up to 2nd, 3rd, 4th. I mean, this bike is just gonna keep accelerating up the hill. It's a very seldom that we get an e-bike in for review that crushes the hill climb test like that. I mean, having that wattage limited, A little interesting, but it makes complete sense. Only reason having that high gearing is a downfall is that when you're trying to pedal up a hill at a lower speed and a lower pedal assist where you're not getting as much power, it's very difficult. So now here on our way back down, I'm just gonna hit the brakes again. I know we already did a brake test, but again, those Tekro brakes are still slowing us down with no problems there. About 25 miles an hour, I think it slowed us down from. Let's go ahead and loop this around. I'm gonna go do a complete stop, and also something that I don't normally do, but I'm gonna get about halfway up this hill and I'm gonna stop again. And I'm just gonna show you how this bike accelerates up a hill while it's already on an incline. So here we are, bottom of the hill, give it throttle. It's gonna taper in 700, 800, 1400 watts of power, almost 1500, almost instantly gets, look at that, 17, 18 miles an hour. And we're probably gonna just keep going up this hill without, it's barely gonna slow down. I think my guess would be is that this bike would probably slow down to about 14, 15 miles an hour. Yeah, there we go. It's dropping to about 14, 15 is probably where it would about settle down, because the speed is, yeah, speed's starting to climb again right here. So we're gonna go ahead and actually stop right here in the middle of the hill. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just let off the brakes and get right back into the throttle. Feel those gears start to grip back there and accelerate. And here we are, 8, 9, 10 miles an hour. Now coming up that hill, I actually have a lot of confidence because the gears in this motor have been upgraded to steel reinforced gears. And so what that means is that the outside of the gears, typically they're made of like nylon or a strong plastic. I know it sounds weird to say strong plastic, but they are typically made of like a strong plastic for, really it's for silence and noise stuff. So let's go ahead and throw it to some third person riding footage. You can see how I fit on this big bike as a 5'7" rider. But I will also give you a good pros and cons list of some reasons why you should and should not consider the 2024 Wired Freedom.
I hope it comes across well on camera, but for the $19.99 price tag of the Wired Freedom, this bike is a powerhouse that is hard to rival. And that's probably one of the many reasons that you guys have been asking us so diligently. The Wired Freedom really rivals what we typically see at this price point. You get all the accoutrements that we typically see on $19.99 priced e-bikes, but with all the extra power that you could want. And thanks to that fat tire frame, you can really use that power to explore almost any terrain or environment that you could think of. This powerhouse of an e-bike got me up to speeds that I typically only see when going downhill. And thanks to that 60 volt electrical system and a 1500 watt nominal motor, those 30 mile an hour speeds are just a throttle twist away. Once you've changed the appropriate settings, of course. Now, speaking of that price, one way I can tell you Wired did not keep the price down of this bike was by offering name brand components. Starting with the brakes, you get Tekro hydraulic disc brakes. The suspension up front is an RST guide fork, and in the rear you get a DNM air shock. You get Shimano drivetrain, and also you get a big 60 volt hang time motor. Wired even went as far as to offer a UL certified 20 amp hour battery. Now, many of these components we see scattered among bikes at this price point, but rarely do we see them offered all on one platform. Then you get to the frame, which is more of a standard design, but Wired even spiced that up a bit by adding BMX style bars, which not only put you in an upright seating position, but allow the rider to really tune the cockpit for extra comfort by twisting them towards or away from you. The frame did feel a bit large for me, a 5'7" rider with the 29-inch inseam, but Wired answered for that is by offering the cruiser model. And thanks to the release of the 2024 model, you no longer have to give up full suspension when you switch to the step through. So at this point, you might be asking, why shouldn't I buy this bike? Well, to be honest, there's not that many reasons, but here are some of the things that you should consider. First, Wired is a small company, and while you can find their bikes in stock, most of the year they operate on a pre-order model. And given their company size, your pre and post-purchase support isn't going to be as polished as some of the bigger brands, but on the other hand, could feel a bit more personalized. We simply don't know, as we just started following them very closely. If you have any experience with Wired support, please let us know and other potential customers know down in the comments below. But probably one of the biggest things that I think people should keep in mind when they're looking at this bike has to be the frame size and power level. The frame of the Freedom was big, barely fitting me, and add in the weight and the power level, you end up with a full-featured e-bike that's very fun to ride, but one that may not be best suited for new riders. And lastly, I have to mention again the tuning and motor specs. Because of how high powered this bike is and how fast the Freedom can go, it kind of skirts around the edge of regulations, and that is when you are not overriding it. So be sure to consult all your local laws and regulations prior to purchase so that you know what you're getting in or onto. And if you do decide to purchase a Wired Freedom or Cruiser, please do so after clicking a link in the description. It's a free and easy way to show support to us here at eBikeScape. Thank you guys so much in advance. So what do you think of the wired e-bikes? Are you in the market for something this fast? Is there a faster fat tire e-bike on the market that we don't know about? Let us know in the comments down below. Ride safe, everyone, and I will catch you guys all in the next one.